This is Self-Starter. Welcome to Self-Starter Season 2. This is a podcast that highlights the small business owners, the self-employed and freelancers who've taken the plunge to create their own desirable lifestyle. My name is Andy Dowling. I'm also the host of the Andy Social Podcast, and I play bass in the Australian metal band Lord. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook by searching @Andy Dowling, or you can go to selfstarter.com.au where you can learn more about me as well as everything to do with the self-employment world. This episode, we speak with Chris Porcianko of Speed Metal Scrap. Now, some of you may know Chris as the guitarist in Melbourne band Vanishing Point. However, Chris has got this really unique story to tell, which finds him running his own business, collecting and selling scrap metal around the suburbs of Melbourne. He'd previously been working for an automobile manufacturer for a couple of decades and saw himself in this rapidly changing industry where the writing was on the wall, so to speak, when it came to his own career in that field. He was really lucky to accept an exit package from his employer, and with two newborn twins, scary stuff, Chris took the plunge to start a new chapter and launch his own business. When he dived into that first year, out of the comforts of traditional employment, Chris had appropriately prepared himself and his family to ensure that expectations were reasonable while he built a reputation and a group of clientele. While money was not a steady stream like it had been in the past, the new world of self-employment and the flexibility that had come with it had helped Chris find a work-life balance that met the needs and desires of both him and his family. Chris's approach to his business might be slightly unorthodox for some. He has no website or social media pages. He instead exists via classifieds and this tight inner network of people that work in his field who support each other with opportunities and work via word of mouth and reputation. Just like being a musician performing on stage, Chris knows he is only as good as the last customer he's dealt with. His reputation is built on being in service to other people, and he's proud to do it with a high standard. More information on this chat can be found in the show notes over at selfstarter.com.au. But for now, please enjoy this really great chat with Chris Porcianko of Speed Metal Scrap.
Hi, I'm Chris Porcianko. I've got my own little business called Speed Metal Scrap. I do scrap metal pickups, commercial and domestic, and all the above. Basically, it's just me with my Ford Ranger ute and a 10x5 10 trailer with a cage, and off I go, mate. Yeah, that's what I do.
Nice and simple, not glamorous,
yeah.
but gets the job done.
Yeah, it's a dirty job, mate, but somebody's got to do it, and it's definitely not glamorous, mate.
I love it.
It's good fun.
What were you doing before the scrap metal business? It's an unusual thing to get into, but sort of what was the path leading up to it?
Well, actually, before that, I was working at the Holden Proving Ground for General Motors Holden for just under 18 years, test driving cars, at the Lang Proving Ground testing facility in southeast Victoria, which is towards Lang or towards Philippine, just off the Bass Highway. So I was doing durability driving on a lot of the new cars, a lot of the prototype cars before they were being released on the market. And it's a big engineering facility, so I was like one of the test drive dummies, test dummy that was driving the car. But I was doing that for just under 18 years and enjoyed every moment of it. But as everybody knows, when the auto industry pretty much went to shit after a while, the company, like with a lot of the other auto companies as well, was offering voluntary separation packages. So I took a VSP. And that was back in early 2013. So, 5.5, 6 years later, I'm, doing scrap metal.
Well,
playing a metal band, I do scrap metal for a living as well. So, it's all about the metal.
I was going to say, I love the name of the business. It certainly ties into who you are. And it's really, really good. And it's a good way to hold yourself accountable, because if you were ever slow or became lazy or whatever, then you leave yourself wide open for criticism just because of the name of your business. So it's actually it's a really good thing for yourself just to hold yourself to that high standard.
Yeah, thanks, man. I try my best. My whole motto is, working for myself is, and like a lot of the guys who are doing this as well, they say to me, because they see me turn up sometimes with a trailer full of, non-ferrous metal or copper or stuff like that. They go, how do you do it? And I just go, Mate, it's simple as this. Just answer the bloody phone. If somebody rings you, pick up the phone. If you miss the call and you see their phone come up on the screen, ring them back. And that's all it is. It's just simple communication. But, some of these guys maybe don't have credit on their phones, or they just can't be bothered, or, they're hungover from the beer, hit the night before. I don't know. But for me, it's always been, answer the phone, communicate as clearly as possible, with my speech, how it goes away, from time to time. But, just ask the people what they need done, what their time frame is, what kind of material it is, and whereabouts the location is, and and take it from there. And some people will ring me up, and they might be in Central Victoria, for example, and I say to them honestly, look, for the amount of material they've got, I can't do it because of the scrap price. Otherwise, I'd have to charge them X amount. But I do, even though I don't know the people, I say, but you've got these facilities that are nearby, within 100 kilometres of where you can go to drop off the metal. Instead of paying me to come out all that way to charge you X amount of hundreds of dollars to pick up, a couple of items, really. So
still being helpful and providing a service, even though it's not a sort of a direct financial benefit for you, it's just your reputation that's really invaluable.
I believe in word of mouth. And another thing is doing this and working in this industry as well, I'm very passionate about recycling. You know what I mean? I don't believe that, in this day and age, we have so many products that it's like you design and, made to only have a certain lifespan, and then they're full of shit. Whereas, especially in the metal game, my whole thinking is, if you can recycle something as best as possible and save something from going into landfill and poisoning the soil, which we eventually build suburbs and people try to grow vegetables and all that type of stuff out of, the soil gets polluted. So for me, it's a passionate thing about recycling as well. I'm also a part-time picker, so I drive around the hard rubbish collection sometimes from time to time. I do knock on the people's doors and ask them politely if I can grab something. And I get some really cool stuff that way as well. Like I've got some really cool musical gear from that, or furnished part of my house, but then nobody would know it was actually put on the side of the road, until they'd ask me.
I love that.
But I just believe in recycling and repurposing as best as possible and saving stuff from going to landfill, because it's criminal what's happening out there. There's so much good stuff, so much beautiful furniture, for example, that people can't be bothered, advertising on Gumtree or Facebook Marketplace, whatever, or saying, look, this is for free, take it. They won't bother doing that, but they'll be bothered to wheel it out to the curb, and most of the time, some people even slash the furniture because they don't want anybody to pick it.
Yeah, they don't want anyone else to get the
that goes
pleasure
automatically into a crusher.
Yeah.
Part of my French is so fucking stupid, and that ends up in landfill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's only so much material and waste material at the end of the day that can be separated, and especially with the waste crisis that's going on now, where China's not buying a lot of the waste from Australia. The market here is trying to find ways, with the plastics and all these different materials, of getting rid of it. And it's a big crisis. It's only going to get worse, so it's not looking good at the moment.
Well, I think the repurpose stuff, and even just your passion for recycling everything, it's a really important point, and I think it comes into the whole self-employment thing. So I'm going to make a little note, and I'm going to come back to that.
Go for it.
But yeah. Listeners that are tuning in and candidly listening to our conversation, I must make a note. We were having a conversation earlier, and we had a slight technical difficulty, and we had to do a round two. But I wanted to sort of
that's the recorder that you got from me. I sent that from you. I sent that to you. That's the one that I picked up from Hard Rubbish. So I said it might not work. but
that's
fucked up now.
That's the risk that you take. But I think just to, touch on what we were talking about earlier in attempt number one, and your time at Holden. I think one really important thing just to mention and sort of just to link it all together is that towards the end of your time at Holden, and I will make another note, really a quick interjecting as I'm thinking of things.
Go for it, man.
We're definitely going to have to do a round two for the Indie Social podcast and get you on to talk about your time at Holden, because some of the things that you've spoken about already, I'm just going, wow, like I had no idea. So some really cool stuff there.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, but you mentioned earlier that towards the end of your time at Holden, you were scrapping vehicles, and you found a bit of an interest there at the time.
Yep.
Can you just explain to me just that transition? Because you sort of touched on it earlier about sort of where your mind was at and sort of seeing what the future held, and sort of that transition into creating this business.
Sure. So basically, I think about 2.5 to 3 years before I finished at Holden, I was responsible for a lot of the cars, the engineering cars that were there. So when an engineering car, it's like says it's end of days, whatever, it's done certain testing, especially in a engineering, background, like in a testing facility. That car might have prototype parts or whatever, but that can't go back out on the Australian road. They won't release it, and that's probably for the better, because sometimes maybe a part could fail or whatever. And if a person's driving their car and a part fails, well, then the person has an accident as a result, well, the company can be in deep shit.
Absolutely.
So, we had to, by law, scrap cars, but also donate cars to companies like Arrow back then. I'm not sure if they still do it now, but Arrow was an Australian Road Rescue Organisation.
Oh, right, yeah.
And with that being said, what Arrow would do is they would have time trial games around the world, especially in the southeast region or the southern hemisphere. So I was responsible for sending off to them at one stage, I think it was about 70 cars, and they went to New Zealand.
Wow.
Where they had the Australian Road Rescue Organisation time trials. It's like the Olympics, but where they use the jaws of life and all that type of stuff, and they simulate car crashes and all that, rescue operations. So we were donating cars like that to them, and to local CFAs, MFBs, but also there was a surplus of cars that every year would be scrapped because they had test parts, whatever, and they'd long been completed. Their schedules were done. So in that time I was doing that, I also was responsible for scrapping a lot of the material there. So at one stage there was a lot of mixed material, like aluminium, metal and everything like that was thrown in the same scrap metal bin. That was going off to one big scrap metal company, which I won't name. And I'm pretty much sure that, back then the company wasn't getting the best bang for its dollar, basically, from the scrap metal material that was there. So when I took over, I said to this big company, I said, okay, I don't just want one bin. I want 3-4 bins, because I'm going to separate the material. So not only the stuff that gets contaminated, but also B, it's recycled, but also C, on top of that, also the company that I work for, that I represent, is making its money back, instead of you guys making all the money and the company that I work for getting ripped off. So, I started getting an interest in recycling and getting the stuff repurposed, but also with that being said, there was stuff that was, obviously long gone, but still there was a use for it. There could be certain materials in that metal material or that object that could be saved, that could be reused for something. You know what I mean? And it's funny enough that, over time, everybody's gone to the whole e-waste thing. So back then we were already doing e-waste and sending off e-waste to other e-waste facilities.
Wow.
Because, as everybody knows, in computers and all that type of stuff, in a motherboard, that you got platinum, you got silver, you got gold, you got copper, you got aluminium in the motherboards. Now, I don't know if Australia has this extracting facility according to ISO standards that does this, but I know that in Japan and South Korea they do. And so those facilities who extract the precious metals from computer motherboards, etc., what happens with that industrial gold and all that, that goes back in your iPhones, your new Samsung TVs, your new Samsung phones. So it's more cost efficient, but also more from a recycling perspective, it's more beneficial to do that instead of digging up football pitches worth of soil to bring up maybe, 20 grams of gold or something like that, Working at Holden, that's how I got the interest in doing scrap, man. It's just followed on from there, just naturally.
And at the time, I think you mentioned that you sort of had this, you created this sort of side hustle, this second business to sort of as a part-time thing, just to bring in a little bit of money. So it was sort of, the concept was already there before you actually, I guess, made the decision to move on from Holden. Can you just explain a little bit of that as far as what that motivation was to start, fueling the second little venture that you had on the side?
Yeah, the motivation was basically because Simone and I, back in 2007, our kids were born. We had twins, so Mia and Thomas. Anybody that knows me, and it's like knows me through Facebook, whatever, know that I love my kids, and Simone and I love our kids dearly. But we had twins. But with that being said, having twins and, paying a mortgage back then and paying the bills and all that type of stuff, my wage back then working for Holden, as much as it was a good wage, but with all the added pressure of having twins and all that, which I don't take back anything. I mean, I love my kids, love my family dearly, but the reality was, at the end of the day, bills still had to be paid. There had to be food on the table. Had to pay the mortgage, had to put fuel in the cars. But on top of that, also, there was double of everything for the kids. So if we went to the doctors or had to get medication, there's double that. Double in, feeding formula, double in nappies, all that stuff. So I had to, on the side part-time every weekend, start hustling, more or less. And it's like, communicating with people, and it's like seeing how I could get into the scrap metal game, because back then the scrap metal price just for general pressing steel was actually quite favourable. So you could make yourself sometimes $150, $200 a week if you were lucky extra. Sometimes you make yourself $80 a week extra, but it was pretty good back then. So, I mean, through this time that I've been doing scrap metal for myself, working full-time, or even back to the part-time days, I've seen the prices fluctuate, go up and down like a yo-yo, from the best price being when I just started, just after that price had dropped. But at that time, the price of steel was like what China was paying back then was like $500 a ton for pressing steel, which is crazy. Yeah, wow. And I've worked at full time when as low as $25 a ton. So you got to be on your feet, got to have your feet to the ground more or less, but you also got to learn to diversify more or less as well doing this type of role.
So it was a bit of it was a means to the end, obviously, just because of the surprise that you both had with these twins on the way, or just coming to the world and just trying to find a way to make it work. But obviously at the time, it was almost like a mechanism to ensure that you had enough money to fund everything. But did you also have in the back of your head that this could be something that I would want to do long term, or was it more of just a very short term vision at that point in time?
It was just a means to an end at that time. And honestly, there was never the thought ever entering my mind that, I'm going to I'll eventually do scrap metalling full time. There was never that thought, because my mindset back then was that once the kids get a little bit older, whatever, and everything settles, and, hopefully that I would have still had a career at Holden until I would have retired. That was my whole aim, because I loved working there. I worked with a really good crew of people, a great organisation, very supportive, work-life balance, and their understanding and their patience with families and all that type of stuff as well is great. They were an awesome organisation to work for. So my dream was to actually continue with them. Also, some listeners will know I also play in Vanishing Point. So back then as well, and hopefully in the future there'll be more touring, but back then, especially when I was at Holden, I would say to them 2-3 months in advance, look, guys, I've got this tour coming up, whatever, I need some time off. And they're just like, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, perfect.
It was not like, no, you can't do that. It was like, not a problem at all. Just let us know from what date to what date you need off, whatever, and we can work it. And if you don't have enough annual leave, whatever, well, then you can put some, long service leave onto it, whatever. We'll figure it out. Everything's okay. That was the type of awesome organisation I worked for. So my whole aim back then was to actually stay with them. I wanted to stay with them, but when the voluntary separation packages were offered, the car industry at that time was in a bit of state of shell shock, to be honest with you. And I was thinking, like, back then, maybe it's my time to go. It was, there was a lot of stress, you know what I mean? And I was just thinking to myself, look, I don't want to rock up one day and I'm not going to enjoy it. Like, I enjoyed my job. And of course, with any work, you had good days and your shit days. But I thought to myself, I don't want to get to the stage where I don't want to go to work. Yeah, absolutely. I loved working there, you know what I mean? And so I thought, if it ever gets to that stage with the stress and instability, with the auto industry, then I'd probably look at different ventures. And just at that time, the voluntary separation packages, or VSPs as we call them, were offered. And I put my hand up. I didn't want to go, but it felt right, you know what I mean? And I felt like I could do it. And I'm still doing this 5-6 years later, working for myself, man, and I enjoy it.
It's a big thing to do, because it's a lot of the narratives that you hear, especially with self-employment, and the stereotypes that you always hear out there is like somebody's dissatisfied in their job, that they escape the cubicle sort of concept, and they want to work for themselves and be empowered to make their own decisions. But for you, it was sort of like well, in a way, you sort of fell into it because it was a means to the end, as you mentioned before, because of your family circumstances. But
Yeah.
you had a job that you were really happy with and passionate about, but you could also
Mm.
see that potentially the writing was on the wall as far as where the industry was going, and that you might,
Yeah.
and you knew you're being sort of realistic with yourself. But you had some great circumstances to be in, and despite
Yeah.
all that, you could sort of have the foresight to go, this might be a sign that I might have to just sort of take up a different path and a different road ahead. And that would have been, I'm just having a guess here, but it would have been quite daunting to make that decision and take those next steps.
It was. Look, to be honest with you, sometimes I was sitting there, when I was pulling only like, $430 a week doing, and busting my ass, learning how the whole thing about scrap metal goes. In the early days, I pretty much, had the mindset to, with the voluntary separation package and the money that I received from it, to basically run the first year at a loss. That's the honest truth. It was like, okay, and it wasn't that whole thing like I'm going to advertise big and all that type of stuff. No, it's like run at a loss because you're still learning the ropes, mate.
What sort of things do you do personally to sort of, I guess, be competitive in a nice way where people are coming back to you and you're building those relationships with people? Because it's not the thing, and we might even go into this because you don't have a big online presence, and there's a reason behind that, and you can dive into that a little bit. But you're really relying on that organic, in your face to face sort of scenario of your reputation. And what sort of things are you thinking about with that to build that business?
Absolutely. Look, man, it comes down to the end of the day that the stuff that I do differently, look, from any other business, there's probably a lot of different things because it is a bit of a niche market, niche type of work. But generally, I answer the phone. Like the phone rings, I pick it up. Yeah. If it's a phone number that I don't know, or it's a contact or a network, or if it's one of the scrap metal buyers that buys this material off me, and they're ringing me for a reason. So I pick up the phone. And a lot of guys, even in the game, say to me, when I rock up with all this material, they go, "How do you do it?" I go, "Dude, I just pick up the phone, and if I miss a call and the phone comes up on the ID, I ring the person back." You know what I mean? I generally ring the person back just after they've left the voice message on my, inbox. You know what I mean? So, and my whole motto is, be honest and truthful with people. Give them a timeline when you can do it. Tell them. Don't bullshit them. Just say, look, I can do it on this day. Send me a picture of the material that you've got, your location, and if it's not too far away, I can do it. Not a problem at all. And with that being said, when I rock up, to the job, I'm very polite and I don't leave a mess. You know what I mean? There's a lot of scrappers out there and a lot of people in the recycling or the rubbish removal game who supposedly are meant to rock up to a job and they have a job booked in and they never turn up and the client's ringing them up nonstop and they don't answer the phone. So, I've got a lot of work also because other idiots are dropping the ball, and I don't apologise for that because at the end of the day, if you're working in this industry, you're working in the services industry. So being in the services industry, it's important for you to make a buck and put the food on the table and pay your bills and keep your roof over your head and keep your family fed and your kids at school. It's important to look after the customer because at the end of the day, if the customer's happy with your service, they will tell all their friends, and some of their friends might be working for commercial companies or big companies that need somebody like you to do the job. You know what I mean? And look, that's how just my business has expanded in a small way. I don't do massive jobs where I'm like, 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week doing a job. I haven't invested in massive trucks or anything like that. No, I just invested in the setup that I've got because that works for me. And I comfortably make money through my hard work, but also I comfortably make money looking after the existing clients that I have, and I can't complain, Andy, to be honest with you. I'm pretty happy with the way things go.
Do you, with your existing clients and as you build those relationships with people, do you go out of your way to contact them and reach out to them to see if there are opportunities, or is it more of a case that you've just got the steady stream of people just coming back to you all the time, so you don't have to go out to them and say, hey, how's things going? Have you got anything going on? Or what sort of approach do you take with stuff like that with your existing clients, or is it just do people just come back to you?
All the above, bro. All the above. There's no rule book. Basically, my typical thing is like, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever, I might sit and have a coffee or a cigarette, whatever. And so I'll think to myself, okay, in my little, memory in my brain, I'll just go, I haven't heard from this guy in a while. So I'll just give him a call, touch base, see how he's going. Because sometimes I've got bins at the facilities or whatever, and I'll just ring him up and go, how you guys going? Do you need me to come down and swing by? And the majority of the time, the answer I get is, sorry, we forgot to get back in contact with you. We've been flat out, but yeah, the bin's overflowing. Come down, pick them up. We'd love you to pick them up.
Perfect.
And I'm like, dude, okay, if the next day I've got like a free day, I'm like, first thing tomorrow morning, I'll be there as soon as your gates open. You know what I mean? It works like that. For example, I have guys who do air conditioning, electricians. I have guys who do commercial cooking equipment, you know what I mean? All these different industries, guys who do computers and stuff like that, e-waste. All these things, I've got my fingers in the pies here and there, and I have, it's like a variety of people who ring me or I contact them, every couple of weeks we talk, you know what I mean? I look after them, they look after me, and they're happy with my service.
Going from a traditional job, so to speak, I mean, although you're doing a pretty unique type of work, but a traditional type of job, and then going into the world of being self-employed, what was the approach that you had to take mentally to sort of look at money differently? Because suddenly, you're not reliant on that steady stream of income that's coming in that you've been relying on for the past 18 years. Suddenly it's, oh wow, it's all on me. And, things such as, did you have to sort of rethink everything in your life as far as your lifestyle and what was important to sort of work out, where this money goes and the value that you put on it as well? Sure.
Okay. So, look, there's some weeks where I might have a full-on week. I'll work 5 days a week and I'll work all weekend. But there's some weeks where I'll work the whole weekend. I might have 1 or 2 days off during the week. So there's that flexibility thing, you know what I mean? It's like making sure your family is flexible as well with what you do. Being self-employed, I think it's important that, as I said, it's communications, answering the phone, or if you get an email, answer the email. And there's no set time that the email is going to come through. There's no set time the phone call is going to come through. I've had phone calls at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean? I still answer them. If I'm awake, I'll answer them. Or they'll leave a message and I'll get back to them a couple, hours later when I wake up, sometimes. But there's that whole flexibility thing. You do have to hustle and bustle sometimes, but I've never thought to myself, I'm going to do this, and at this stage in my life, in 10, 20 years' time, I expect to be here with my family. I expect to have X amount of millions or X amount of properties and all that type of stuff. I love my life how it is, and I live in the now, right now. I'm enjoying it now. I'm not going to wait 20 years to enjoy what I have now. So with that being said, I was, first and foremost, when I got into this game doing scrap metaling, I said to myself, I'm not going to get stressed out over money. I'm not going to get stressed out over trying to keep up with the Joneses. I'm just going to carve my little niche and look after myself, look after my family, and work by myself.
Chris, if anyone's in the suburbs of Melbourne and needs some stuff moved, how can they get in contact with you?
Sure. Okay. So basically, I only advertise through 2 ways. So I advertise on Gumtree. My company is called Speed Metal Scrap. Or you could reach me on Facebook Marketplace. Some of the times I do advertise on there. Or me being Chris Porcianko, just contact me through Facebook. It's Porcianko, and I'll get back in contact with you. You know what I mean? I'm happy to help anybody. I predominantly do the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne, but based on quantity and the quality of the material, if it's a large amount, whatever that I can see realistically as being that I can move, and it's worth some money, I'll travel to central Victoria or to bloody, far western Victoria, whatever. I can do it. I'm happy to do the jobs. At the end of the day, I'm not going to kill myself over it, but I'm happy to do the jobs. And, I do everything from scrap metal, but I also do e-waste. I do factory clear-outs, also garage clear-outs, domestically speaking, commercial clear-outs, ex-rentals. I handle deceased estates as well, so I do deceased estates, and I handle that with utmost respect. So if anybody is going through a situation where they want to clear out stuff, whatever, before hiring a skip bin company that's going to pretty much put a lot of the stuff to landfill, give me a call.
Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy, man. It's an absolute pleasure once again to be on your show. I love it, man. It's great what you're doing, dude.
To learn more about Chris from Speed Metal Scrap, you can click through to the show notes on your podcast player or head over to selfstarter.com.au where you'll find more details from our guest as well as my key takeaways. Number 1, answer the phone. It's the simple stuff that counts, and often we find ourselves in a state of self-sabotage by being lazy, avoiding uncomfortable moments, or allowing introverted tendencies to overwhelm us. Chris has put this really simple rule in place where he always answers the phone no matter what. He's seen others make the mistake by being complacent, and by following this simple rule, he ensures that he never misses an opportunity. Now, have a think about how you can set rules in place to ensure that you never miss out. If it's not phone, maybe it's email and instant messages that you're often neglecting. Number 2, reputation and word of mouth. It is a common theme with the Self-Starter guests, and it's worthy of highlighting again. You are a reflection of your business, and your personal reputation directly equates to not only return business, but also recommendations to others. Chris doesn't invest a lot in marketing, as he's built this network of people who, through word of mouth, bring him new opportunities. It's cheap and organic. Now, don't get me wrong, marketing is always important. However, if you invest in customers who come to you in the early stages with great service, they will reward you with more business in the long term, both directly and indirectly. Number 3, be realistic, invest, and profit later. It's all about delayed gratification. As the dollars roll in, spend wisely. It's important to invest in what you are doing so you can ensure that not only the business grows, but it's sustainable. As long as your basic lifestyle needs are met, try to put as much back into it as possible. Number 4, touch base and say hello. Just because you don't hear from someone doesn't mean they're not interested. Life gets in the way, and sometimes people just get busy. Sometimes a friendly follow-up call, an email, or a message can do wonders and jog the memory of someone who is genuinely interested in doing business with you. Just like answering the phone, Chris has ensured that this simple rule of follow-up and reconnecting is followed and is proving to have great results. Now, some people may have concerns that it could come across as being a little bit desperate. However, it's all in the delivery. Remind people that you exist and that you are ready to serve them when they are ready. We're done. To learn more about this episode and previous ones, check out selfstarter.com.au. To have a squiz at my other podcast, the Andy Social Podcast, the band Lord, or anything else that's happening in my world, head over to andydowling.net. Looking forward to having you back for the next episode of Self-Starter. Larry.